This is The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
They're running a strange program, y'all.
Now, here's Frank Morano.
Well, I can promise you this is not a song that Joe Biden is singing these days, especially not today. Good morrow, everyone. This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. If you haven't heard about it yet, there was a presidential debate last night. The earliest general election debate that we've ever had. And if you didn't see it, here's a little bit of what you missed.
Making sure that we're able to make every single solitary person eligible for what I've been able to do with the COVID. With dealing with everything we had to do with. Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you, President Biden. President Trump.
I want you to keep in mind that this was after 7 days of preparation for President Biden. That's what we got. Now, there were moments of serious, real debate. There were moments where they really did mix it up on the issues that matter.
You can see he is 6'5" and only 225 pounds, or 235 pounds. Well, you said 6'4", 200. Well, anyway, that's what you're. Anyway, just take a look at what he says he is, and take a look at what he is. Look, I'd be happy to have a driving contest with him. The reason I got my handicap, which when I was vice president, down to a 6. But by the way, I told you before, I'm happy to play golf if you carry your own bag. Think you can do it?
That's the biggest lie, that he's a 6 handicap of all.
I was at 8 handicap.
Yeah.
8.
Never.
But I had, how many?
I've seen you swing. I know you swing.
I don't mean to laugh because honestly, I thought it was a pretty sad debate. But the two of them are battling with one another for an hour and a half, saying the most vile things about one another, each one calling the other the worst president of all time. And the only time that Trump really seemed to get bothered is when he got his golf game insulted. But honestly, I mean, it was horrendous. It was horrendous. And wherever you fall on the political spectrum, there's no way to look at this debate objectively and think it was anything other than an unmitigated disaster for President Biden. And honestly, it made me sad because he clearly had no business being up on that stage. He clearly has no business running for president. He clearly, and I'm not a Biden hater. I think, I have a lot of respect for what he's done and for his public service. But he clearly is significantly diminished. If you compare that to the Joe Biden of 2020, even, or 2008 or 2012, it's a different guy. The man has absolutely no business running for president. And honestly, it made me sad to watch that this man was in this position. He clearly should not be, meaning the position of running for the presidency. And I don't understand how anybody that cares for this man, his family, his friends, his staff, his consultants, the people that he trusts, doesn't insist that he immediately step aside. And that's why, even though this debate last night, I think most debates honestly don't have winners and losers, but last night's debate was a knockout win for President Trump. And that's why I think yesterday may have been the single worst day of the campaign for Donald Trump. Now, why? How can that be true? How can it have been an unmitigated disaster for Joe Biden and yesterday be the single worst day of the campaign for Donald Trump? Because keeping in mind what Anthony Weiner said, keeping in mind what Debbie Schlussel said, I don't see any way after that display that President Biden stays on the ticket. I see no way that he's able to continue. And I think, I don't know who's going to replace President Biden, but whoever replaces President Biden will be a far tougher opponent for Trump than Biden will be. And I went through the list of the possible contenders: Jay Pritzker, Governor Shapiro, Governor Whitmer, Kamala Harris, Governor Newsom, Senator Klobuchar, Pete Buttigieg. Whoever it is will be a stronger candidate than Biden. He or she absolutely will be. So I think this might be a case where Trump wins for losing or loses for winning, whatever the case may be, meaning it went so well for him that Biden is not going to be able to continue. I can't see it. Now, if President Biden does continue, to Obie Murray's point, this is going to be an electoral disaster for him. There is no way that he wins this election, period. After that, I mean, it's a done deal. I posted on Twitter and on Facebook that honestly, and people might have thought this was shtick, that if you're concerned about beating Donald Trump, if that's your primary priority, I honestly see the only alternative for you being to vote for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. You know, when I saw Mr. Kennedy in person a few months ago, he was telling me about his polling, which polled 27,000 people around the country. And he said they did polls both with him in the poll and without him in the poll. And the one thing that was consistent in both cases was that there's no scenario in which President Biden wins. And that if you do a head-to-head matchup of Kennedy versus Trump, he does much, much better than if you do a head-to-head matchup of Biden versus Trump. And I have to think that after this, there's going to be a lot of people that have heretofore been Biden supporters that realize, okay, the only way that you can stop Trump is to back a candidate that is at least semi-coherent. Now, they excluded Robert F. Kennedy Jr. from the debate last night, which I think was outrageous. But I think that he did his own live stream, which had apparently about 5 million viewers tuning in live, in which he did the debate. He had a debate that was moderated by John Stossel, and it was very clever how they did it. John Stossel, they would play the clips of what was going on CNN, and then John Stossel would be the moderator and ask Kennedy, all right, what do you think? And he would give his answer. Now, I'm not going to give you a whole bunch of Kennedy clips, but I am going to play for you just his closing statement. And before I do that, though, I'm curious whether or not you agree with my analysis that Biden is absolutely done as a candidate. He will absolutely be replaced. And if 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. And what I would especially love to hear from you, if you're a Democrat, you had the woman that called earlier, who's a primary Democrat from Westchester County in New York. I asked her who she would like, and she said Governor Newsom. If you're a registered Democrat and you agree with my scenario that Biden is done, who would you like to see be the nominee? Who is your strongest candidate against Trump? Now, since they excluded RFK from the debate, I'm not going to make this an RFK infomercial at all, but I will play for you his closing statement, because I think in this statement, he really does sum up the differences between he and Presidents Biden and Trump. Here was Robert F. Kennedy Jr. in the John Stossel moderated debate on Thursday night.
In 2013, there was a poll taken that asked young people under 35 in this country, are you proud of the United States? 85% said yes. The same poll taken 5 months ago, 18% said yes. So somehow, during the administration of these two presidents, an entire generation of Americans has lost pride in our country and a hope in their own futures. And they feel that way because they see what's happening. They can't get into a home. First generation in history in America that is going to live worse lives than their parents. They see the vitriol that you saw here, the division, the polarization that makes them disgusted with politics. They're seeing the corrupt merger of state and corporate power that has transformed our agencies from the CIA, the health agencies, the environmental agencies, into sock puppets, the industries they're supposed to regulate. They're seeing the destruction of our soils, the destruction of our air and water. They're watching this happen, and the politicians do nothing about it except for hate on each other. If you want more of the same, you should vote for President Biden, President Trump. You know what's going to happen. You know that. They're going to give you 4 more years of the same stuff. If you want things to completely change, you're going to support me because I'm going to change everything. And this is a moral fight. This is a moral battle for the soul of our nation, to restore our moral authority around the world by projecting economic power abroad rather than spending $8 trillion on regime change wars that have left every nation we've touched worse off than we found it. And restoring our moral authority here at home. The first day in office, you heard what they're going to do. You don't even understand it. Here's what I'm going to do. Day 1 in office, I'm going to issue an executive order saying any federal official who tells a lie to the American public will lose his job. So I'm going to stop the surveillance state. I'm going to stop the propagandizing by our agencies of the American public. I'm going to unravel the war machine. I'm going to unravel the corrupt merger of state and corporate power. I know how to do it. I've been litigating against these agencies for years, and I'm uniquely suited to do this, but I can tell you I'm going to do these things when I get in there. I'm going to make sure that our Constitution is protected, that AI is deployed to make government more transparent rather than by government to enslave the rest of us. I'm going to bring AI home and blockchain home because we need these new industries to grow our way out of the debt crisis. This is something that these two aren't even talking about. But if you want everything to change, you'll support me. If you want to vote out of fear, you need to support one of those guys. If you want to vote out of hope, out of inspiration, out of pride in your country, out of restoring the moral backbone of our people and our nation, you should vote for me.
Honestly, I found the message pretty inspiring, and it made me even happier that that's who I've decided to support. But let's talk about President Biden. Will he be replaced? And if you're a Democrat, who do you want to see replace him? 646-720-0635, 646-720-0635. We're going to talk with Noam Laden in just a bit, but he can still be replaced. Elaine Camark, who is the most knowledgeable person on this subject. She's a senior fellow in governance studies and the director of the Center for Effective Public Management at the Brookings Institute, and a real expert in American electoral politics, explained the mechanics of how this would work. She was on with Michael Smerconish on CNN back in March. And obviously some of this has to do with the timing, whether it's before the convention or after the convention. Here's Elaine Camark.
Both parties have provisions in their rules for the chairman of the party to call into session the full Republican National Committee or the Democratic National Committee. The Republican National Committee is a little less than 200 people. The Democratic National Committee is around 400. And those committees are authorized to choose a nominee for their party.
So that's how it would work. Now, what happens if the election occurs, President Biden wins or President Trump wins or Robert F. Kennedy Jr. wins, And then they need to drop out before the Electoral College meets, before January 6th. And what happens then? Here's Elaine Camargue breaking it down.
When you vote for in the primary, you're actually voting for delegates. When you vote in the presidential election, you are actually voting for electors. Some states actually put the names of those people on the ballot. They meet in the second week of December in their state capitals, and they sign a certificate of ascertainment, it's called, a little old-fashioned, and that certificate goes to the United States Senate. Now, those people generally vote for whoever their party's nominee was. If their party's nominee has dropped out for some reason, is not around for some reason, then we're in a little bit of uncharted territory, because the laws that say you have to vote for the winner of your state obviously don't help you very much.
We will see what happens. All right. Will President Biden drop out? And if he drops out, who replaces him? 646-720-0635. 646-720-0635. Chris is in the Catskills. What do you think, Chris?
Good morning, Frank.
Morning.
Your analysis was spot on. And the fact that you mentioned, I had no knowledge of the Kennedy debate. John Stossel moderating that. The big winners last night were libertarians, because our country's in big trouble and they believe in much less government. I think the best replacement would be Sherrod Brown and Dean Phillips as vice president.
Well, I don't see them picking Dean Phillips because, while I'm impressed with Dean Phillips, I don't see them picking him because he's viewed as being sort of a Democratic apostate now, because he was the only person, the only elected official that was willing to challenge Biden. So I could see them picking someone like a Sherrod Brown, even though he's up for re-election and maybe the only Democrat in Ohio that could win the seat in its current incarnation. But I can't see them picking Dean Phillips as vice president. And I think, honestly, it would be very difficult for them to jettison Kamala Harris and replace a woman of color with two white guys, especially for a party that's so driven by identity politics these days. I mean, do you disagree?
Well, personally, I think Kamala Harris is awful. So that's why I agree exactly with what you said. But the question was, who would I like to see?
Oh, I see.
So,
I got you.
Yeah,
but you're not speaking from a practical, perspective, just who you would like.
I'm a policy
Gotcha.
wonk, and I think those two men are the closest things that we have to that now. I have serious concerns about the future of our country. The populist is dumbed down, and everybody just identifies with either movements or ideologies. And I think those two men are policy wonks, as close as you're going to get to it in today's world of politics, especially Phillips. And thinking about your question, that I believe that's the best answer. And I think, Sherrod Brown, it speaks well, and he's known because he did run for president before. And like you just brought up, he's from a swing state, Ohio. So I think Trump would have some serious trouble in a debate with him. And the debate last night was awful. I mean, I saw an assembly debate between two women. I have a socialist assemblywoman, but she sounded a lot better than those two men last night. And I voted for the challenger in the primary, who lost 2-1, but 28-year-old woman who's a novice in politics sounds better than, current president, former president. What does that tell you about the state of politics in our country today and the governance, the lack of governance that we're receiving?
Yeah, and well said, I think, on all around. I just one point of clarification: Sherrod Brown never ran for president.
I thought he did and dropped out.
No, I think you might be confusing him with Tim Ryan, another Ohio Democrat. But no big deal. I mean, the rest of your point is well taken. Thank you, Chris. 646-720-0635. And that's why Chris is an intelligent guy. And this is one of the rare instances where he has not mentioned that he was formerly an elected official. But he is probably more sophisticated than the average voter. And so are you, if you're listening to this program. The bottom line is most people cast their vote for president for a wide variety of subjects. I can't break it down into percentage, but a lot of people cast their vote for president based on political party. I like this guy because he's the Democrat. I like this guy because he's the Republican. A lot of people cast their vote for president because of how a candidate comes across, the so-called superficial factors, how he looks, how he sounds. I like the looks of him. That looks like a president. Or he talks like me, or he sounds like he's a no-nonsense guy. Other people vote for a candidate for president based on their race or their gender or their ethnicity. That is absolutely a factor. Other folks will vote for a candidate for president based on what they think is going to be done for them. My father was in the health insurance business 32 years ago, and he absolutely refused to vote for Bill Clinton because in 1992 he ran on a platform of essentially nationalizing healthcare, and he said, all right, that's not going to be good for me being in the private health insurance business, so he voted self-interest. Other people voted for President Bush because President Bush promised a tax cut. Other folks voted for President Obama because he was giving some form of giveaway to them. So some people vote self-interest. Some people vote based on political party. Some people vote based on identity politics. Some people vote based on whatever else. I don't know how many people actually sit and look at all of the issues and say, oh, I agree with this guy on China. I agree with this guy on abortion. I agree with this guy on guns. I don't think most voters, at least not the voters that are going to make the difference in this election, I don't think most of this those candidates do that. All right. Those of you, 646-720-0635. E. Frank, hello.
Yes. Hi, Frank. I think that RFK is doing very well in his campaign, his Independence Fusionist national campaign, and I think he's a buffer to end any rivalry that is between Trump and Biden. And I actually believe Biden won the debate this evening.
All right. Well, I mean, I can't tell if E. Frank is saying things for shock value or if he really likes whatever mental institution he's currently housed in and he was in danger of being released. So he's putting a comment out there like that so to make sure that he stays there. All right. Noam Laden is here. We are also going to talk with someone who wrote a very interesting op-ed in the New York Post the other day, Dr. Nadina Galle. And it's very hot out. And apparently, if you're hot and in the city, there's a real trick to cooling things down. Noam Laden and Nadina Galle will join me straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here, you can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space. With the air, like I don't care, baby, by the way. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without a roof. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like happy.
after the hour. This is The Other Side of Midnight. We're going to talk with Dr. Nadina Galle in just a moment. But before we do, we're joined by the best newsman in all of radio.
Stand by for The Other Side of Midnight's news.
From New York City, The Other Side of Midnight and its affiliated stations present national and international news with Frank Morano and news director Noam Laden. Their summary of the world news and personal comments. Get the rest of the story.
All right, Noam, before we get to whatever you have for us, I have to get your take on last night's debate.
It was hard to watch.
Yeah, it was. It was sad,
and
honestly.
There was this one great moment early on when it was clear that the president was going to have an incredibly rough night, where there was a two-shot of Trump and Joe Biden, and Biden was answering a question and could not get through the answer. And Trump actually looked like he was sympathetic to what was going on. Like he almost looked over at Joe Biden and said, wow, all the stuff I've been saying about him, whether I knew it was true or not, is actually true. Right. And you could almost feel him pulling back just a little bit, that he didn't really have to do a whole lot during the course of the night if he didn't want to, because all the ammunition he had ready to go, he probably wouldn't need. I think he was smart enough to realize in that moment that this is not going to be a night about me. Nobody's paying attention to what I'm doing. They're all paying attention to President Biden. So I talked to
Anthony Weiner earlier. He believes that Biden is still going to be on the ticket. I just said that I have a very difficult time seeing that happen, and they're going to replace President Biden with somebody else. What do you think?
I don't know my history that well, so maybe you can answer this question. Has it been done before?
Well, not really. Not after someone has clinched the primary, but keep in mind, prior to the 60s, the conventions were where the nominees were picked. I mean, that's where they would battle it out.
Right.
The primary being the determining factor of who the nominee is a modern invention. That's only been the case since the 60s.
Right.
So, no, but in that time it hasn't happened. The closest, that we've seen is, I guess, 1972, where Thomas Eagleton, the running mate for George McGovern, said that he'd been brainwashed in Vietnam, and they replaced him with Sergeant Shriver.
Right. What was interesting is about maybe it was a month or maybe it was 2 months ago now, the Wall Street Journal did this full report where they had spoke to about 45 Democrats and Republicans who had spent a fair amount of time in the White House. And the way they described the president was exactly as we saw him last night. And so we interviewed the two reporters who had written that piece. And we got blowback from the Democratic Party for having them on, saying that it was we didn't do enough to show the other side, that it wasn't right. But the truth of the matter was, it was completely right.
Oh,
and
staggering.
And the other thing was, I was telling you before we came on the air, I sent out texts to 5 Republicans and 5 Democrats, and I said, hey, during the course of the night, do me a favor, send me what you think is going on, and and who you think's winning or whatever. And of course, it turned into what it did. And the answers I get just ended up being really more hysterical than anything else. I mean, some people were hysterical about how bad Joe Biden was. One person said, I started with white wine, and by the end of the night, I was drinking boxed wine. That's how bad it got. And I thought that was a pretty funny answer. So.
Give us one quick story with Dr. Nadina Galle waiting in the wings.
So we've been seeing this proliferation of fake job ads online. Some of them are just downright all-out scams where people are trying to get information from you, bank account numbers, that kind of thing, so they can then steal from you. Okay, we got a lot of those. But this is more outrageous than even that is. So this proliferation of these fake online postings for jobs that are not real are being sent out by actual companies and hiring managers. And there's a bunch of motives for running what essentially are deceptive ads. There's no job available, but people will apply. And you talk to people who are out of work or looking for a new job, and what do they constantly complain about? Is they'll send all over their information to these hiring managers or to these HR departments, and they hear nothing back. They're essentially ghosted for giving them all this information.
My sister-in-law is going through this now,
So now nearly 60% of companies that were surveyed in this study that was done just in the last couple weeks said that they collect resumes constantly to maybe use them at a later date. But they say more times than not, they never do use them at a later date. Also, what they do is they want to make their companies look good. So a lot of times they'll post these ads just to make it look like they're doing hiring and that something interesting is going on in the company. And they say that really works for them. The other reason, here's the most outrageous reason that these companies, and these are high-level managers at big companies, and we're not talking small companies, who say part of the reason they post a lot of these jobs is to intimidate the workers who are sitting in those jobs right now.
You kidding?
No.
Oh, boy.
So let's say a news director post goes up here at WABC. Let's hope that ever happens. The idea is to make me work harder at my job or be worried that someone's going to take my job.
Well, I mean, I can absolutely see Chad Lopez doing that. If he hasn't done that already, if he's listening to this right now, he's absolutely going to do that. That's totally up his alley.
That's outrageous. So when you're out there applying for a job, maybe we have to go back to the days where you actually knock on the door in person, sit down with somebody. None of this online nonsense where your stuff goes into a vacuum, never to be seen again. And then to hear that you have the scammers who are trying to take money on one side, and then actual companies who are collecting resumes for really no reason whatsoever is outrageous.
It is indeed. All right, Noam, I'm going to let you go clean out your desk.
Okay.
While we move on.
And now you know the rest of the story.
So over the weekend, I read a fascinating op-ed in the New York Post, which is not exactly a newspaper that's known for highlighting things about climate change or anything like that. And the first thing that caught my eye was the headline: "Why Trees Are the Key to Cooling a Warming Planet." And I read this op-ed and I just thought it was so interesting and so relevant to people like me that live in cities that I wanted to invite the author on, and we lucked out in that she agreed. I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Nadina Galle. She's an ecological engineer and is a 2024 National Geographic Explorer. She's also the author of The Nature of Our Cities, Harnessing the Power of the Natural World to Survive a Changing Planet. Nadina, if I could call you that, or Dr. Galle, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
Hey, Frank, great to be here. And please do call me Nadina.
So I really enjoyed your piece, and I'm looking forward to reading your book. Cities, and I love cities, and I'm a very proud city guy. I love pavement. I love sidewalks. I love everything about it. To me, that's where I feel the most at home, is in an urban environment. But cities can have green space and trees as well, right?
Absolutely. And I don't think you're alone in that, Frank. I think now the stat is 80% of Americans live in urban areas, and I think that's expected to jump to something like 90% in 2050. So this is, I like to call cities the default human habitat. I mean, this is where the majority of us live.
So, when we think about how to stay cool when it's super hot in the middle of a heat wave in a city, you think about a swimming pool. You think about maybe a trip to the beach. You think about staying indoors and the air conditioning. But you say that the key to staying cool in a city is trees. You mentioned that a young tree has the cooling effect equivalent to 10 air conditioners running for 20 hours a day. Explain that to us if you can, Nadina. Why are we better off with trees rather than staying inside with the air conditioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first, just to take a little step back, why is it that we feel hotter in cities in times of extreme heat or warmer weather? And that's due to something called the urban heat island effect. The idea being that the surrounding, that the city is often hotter compared to let's say the countryside around the city, is mainly because pavement and buildings retain heat and they reflect it back into the surrounding air. And paved surfaces also don't absorb rainwater either. So that's actually why we're more prone to flooding in cities. It's just another issue that, of course, we're facing in New York and beyond. And what trees really can do is they help us by doing something called evapotranspiration. Basically, they take up that water and they put it back, and that offers not only shade but also a cooling effect, and you feel it quite noticeably. And honestly, I think the best way to do this is on the next hot summer day, stand in the middle of a parking lot, completely pavement covered, and then go and stand on a tree-lined street. And what you're going to feel is about a sometimes 25 to even 30 degree Fahrenheit difference. And I think that really says it all.
You've called trees nature's air conditioners. Can you talk about some specific urban tree projects that have successfully reduced temperatures in cities?
I talk about a number of them in my book, which you kindly mentioned. One of them that most inspired me was a city in Colombia called Medellin. Medellin actually planted 800,000 trees and it doesn't just have to be trees. I think that's where a lot of this discussion tends to go. And yes, trees are the most effective at cooling, but if there's no room for trees, also things like rooftop gardens, green walls, even potted plants, like these things can all make a difference. And Medellin, due to its massive campaign to really try and cool the city, they actually cooled the entire city by 2 degrees Celsius. That was. And this just shows that that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is often the difference between life and death when in these times of extreme heat. And the biggest thing also that trees allow us to do in cities especially is that they also really contribute to the cooling at night. And that's something that we often forget about is when we're in times of extreme heat, we can, tell people to stay away, from the extreme heat, be in the shade of trees, make their way to cooling centers, drink enough water. But it's really the nighttime when people are sleeping that we need that respite for our bodies to recover. And if you're sleeping on a tree-lined street, in an apartment on a tree-lined street, you're actually going to be sleeping in a cooler room than you would if you were not. And that is so critical to letting your body heal from the extreme heat.
That is really interesting. So you mentioned that vegetation's cooling effect grows as the temperatures rise. Can you explain the science behind that?
Yeah, so essentially what happens is that we have essentially the larger the tree, the bigger the cooling effect. But not only in terms of shade, right, which I think feels quite common sense, but it's also that larger trees also have the bigger ability to take up more water from its roots. The more water that a tree is able to take up, the more of the evapotranspiration that they're able to provide as well, which is going to give you that direct cooling effect when you're standing beside or standing below a big tree.
That's really interesting. What was the moment, and if people are just tuning in, we're talking with Dr. Nadina Galle. She's the author of The Nature of Our Cities, Harnessing the Power of the Natural World to Survive a Changing Planet. If you didn't get a chance to read this op-ed in the New York Post, I'm going to link to it right now on my Facebook page. You could check it out, facebook.com/MoranoFan. And essentially it says that the key to staying cool in urban environments is to have more trees. Nadina, what was the moment, the sort of eureka moment for you that made you realize the true potential of urban greenery in combating extreme heat?
Oh, that's a great question. I think one story that really stuck out to me, and I write about this in the book. I was living in Amsterdam at the time. I'm Dutch originally, but I grew up in Canada, and I've spent the last 10 years back in Amsterdam. And it was July of 2019, and in 2018, Europe had gone through these massive heat waves, and nobody thought it could get worse than that until 2019 came around, and it was indeed even worse. And I think that's the thing that we're seeing with extreme heat is we're seeing extreme heat in cities that are unprepared to deal with hot weather. We're not talking about Flagstaff or Phoenix, Arizona. We're talking about cities like Portland, Seattle, and Amsterdam, Paris. These are not cities that are meant to get this warm. And living in Amsterdam, one of the things that really stuck with me is it was this particularly hot day. I believe it was July 29th, 2019. And I had heard on the radio, actually, that it was incredibly important to watch out for our vulnerable neighbors. Well, one of my neighbors in my Amsterdam townhouse is at the time, 97-year-old. So yes, if you're doing your math, she's now 102 years old.
Wow.
Woman, yes. I have a centenarian living beside me. Her name is Mrs. Temple. And I'd heard on the radio how important it was to look after our vulnerable neighbors, and especially elderly women are actually more susceptible to being affected by extreme heat. So I talk about the story of me, racing up and down my townhouse, knocking on the door, trying to find her, trying to get into her apartment, and me being so worried about her. I go over to her niece's house, her 72-year-old niece who lives below me, actually. And, she hadn't heard of her either, so we're all getting pretty worried. I'm late for an appointment, so I decide to go to that and then, continue as I'm coming back. And as I cross the street of my apartment into the park that borders on our street, Fulmel Park, Amsterdam's largest park, I actually see her on a bench underneath the shade of a tree. And I sit with her for a moment, mostly just overjoyed that she's there and that she's okay, because my mind was already rushing to all these awful things. And there she is, and she's telling me in her, 97-year-old glory, she's a no-nonsense woman, that this is it, and it's better than air conditioning. She can't afford air conditioning anyways, and, that's something that she never had in her apartment. Nobody in Amsterdam has air conditioning. And there she is, cooling off under the shade of a tree. And I thought, well, isn't that just it? And I think the most important part of that story is that this oak tree is about, 15 meters from her house. And that's what I really emphasize in the book as well, is it's not enough to just have, the central parks here and there to provide these areas, these cooling centers, really, that I would say are almost emergency centers in times of extreme heat. We need this on absolutely every block, on every street corner. This is something that everyone needs to be able to have access to, because it is so life-saving.
So how can local communities get involved in greening their neighborhoods? Are there any simple steps that people can take to start making a difference and actually lowering the temperature in their area?
Yeah, I would say the number one step is to first really be aware of what's around you, right? So kind of take stock. And I think that's the number one thing that I struggle with talking about urban nature, is that it is often so overlooked, right? We walk on a tree-lined street and we really don't notice how pleasant that is until it's a really hot day, or until maybe some of those trees have been removed. So I think number one, take stock of what you have around you, within a 500-meter radius of your house. I think that's really critical, because those are the ones that you're going to be able to access in times where you need them. That's number one. Take stock of what's around you. Number two is get involved with any neighborhood groups that exist, and there's so many wonderful ones. Even just type in urban forestry and your city name, urban forestry and your neighborhood name, urban trees and your neighborhood name, and hopefully you'll come across an environmental group that's working on these issues. And that could either be advocating for more tree planting in your area, that could be maintaining the trees that are already there. And you might find that there's not an environmental group, and who knows, maybe you might feel so inclined to start one.
Well, that is certainly good advice. And we've been talking with Dr. Nadina Galle, and you could read the op-ed on my Facebook page. You could check out her book. It's called The Nature of Our Cities. Nadina, I'll end with this. So in your research, I'm just curious, have you found any surprising benefits of urban greenery beyond just cooling? Maybe something related to mental health or community well-being?
One that immediately sticks out to me, Frank, and I think this will shock a lot of people, there's been some incredible research done on the health of pregnant mothers and the surrounding environment. There's actually really good research to show that women who live within 500 meters of in a greener neighborhood close to trees actually give birth to higher birth rate babies. And that's not only incredible, right, for the mother and for the babies in that moment, but I think it just speaks to the environment that we are bringing new human beings out into the world. And as a brand new mother myself, that really stuck out to me. I just think that's that's incredible. Just think about the success that you're able to set up a new life with, being able to bring them into the world in that kind of environment. So that stuck out to me.
Wow, I'm glad I asked that. Hey, congratulations on being a new mom. Maybe we'll get your child together with my 2-year-old sometime, and they'll play in a treehouse or something. Dr. Nadina Galle, a real treat to talk with you. I hope we can do this again.
I'd love that. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you. If you want to comment on anything we talked about, you can give us a call, 646-720-0635. We're also going to do 15 seconds of fame. If you want to start queuing up for that, that's 646-720-0635, where you can say whatever you like for 15 seconds, 646-720-0635. We'll do that straight ahead.
The Other Side of Midnight. It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
Side of midnight, the Frank Morano Show.
5 minutes till the top of the hour. We're going to do 15 seconds of fame in a moment, where you can be heard on any subject for 15 seconds. Just dial 646-720-0635. That's 646-720-0635. I want to wish a couple of happy birthdays. First, to my friend Mike Lindell, a great guy who, I don't know if they're currently an advertiser, but he has been a big supporter of me on the radio with his My Pillow company for many years. And even if he wasn't, he makes a great product, and he's a very nice man, and has an incredible life story, going from being a crack addict to a CEO, and one of the favorite sons of Minnesota. And we're honored to be on in Minneapolis on WCCO. Happy birthday, Mike Lindell. Also, my friend Joan Pelzer, a very experienced social media person, radio producer, marketing manager, looks a lot like Roz from Friends, always with a smile on her face, always incredibly kind, and incredibly bright, bubbly, and vivacious. So happy birthday, Mike Lindell, and to Joni Pelzer. Hopefully both of you have a great birthday, and that all of your birthday wishes come true. Happy birthday to both of you. All right. Without further ado, we will give you 15 seconds to say what you like at 646-720-0635 as part of
The Other Side of Midnight. This is 15 Seconds of Fame.
Viviana!
I thank God that the president handled the issue of abortion brilliantly. He gave the onus to the states, exposed the fact that Democrats support abortion up to and including 9 months, and he supports the exceptions, rape, incest, and the life of
Neil.
Bill, Frank, I watched the debate with my son, and we loved it. For my little 8-month-old grandson, Ricky, he stuck through the whole thing. I'm worried that he's going to be an independent and support RFK.
E. Frank.
Yes, Frank, I'm an average New York City resident and citizen. You're saying that I'm calling for a mental institution. It is very normal to say that someone can win a presidential campaign. There's nothing wrong with that.
Mike.
Morning, Frank. The emperor has stepped from the shadows and into the light. It's so obvious to all. He's got no clothes. And yet his supporters can't see his nakedness. They will support him and vote for him, no matter how naked he is. Like lemmings to the cliff, they will follow him over the edge and allow the country to continue to spiral down the drain.
Cheech.
Vision Zero is a scam. There are so many people getting hit by these illegals on the illegal bikes. And, hey, Mike, how's the new AC unit doing there?
Ray.
Yes, Mr. Weiner kept calling Trump a liar and nobody likes him and he's 30% favorable. Well, I looked up in a line on different polls. Every poll had him out 40 to 49%. So I think Mr. Weiner should apologize. He is the liar.
All right, Ray, we will give you the last word on Monday. We've got some interesting stuff on the Mandela effect. I have also reached out to Elaine Carmack, who I referenced earlier, the best expert on how the mechanics of replacing President Biden would work at this point, because honestly, that's what's going to happen. Frank Morano, good day.